Welcome to the debate. Imagine walking into like a high-stakes auction house, right? The art on the block is completely priceless. The room is packed with eager buyers, but there is one glaring omission.
No limit on the paddles.
Exactly. There is absolutely no limit on the paddles. Some bidders are drawing from, modest everyday savings accounts, while others have direct access to a multi-billion-dollar sovereign wealth fund.
Right.
So we call the resulting bidding war a, quote, competition. But when the hammer finally falls, did we actually witness a true contest of valuation? Or did we just, watch inevitability take its course?
That's the million-dollar question. Or, I guess in this context, the $10 million question.
Right, exactly. So today, we are examining a question that strikes at the very heart of modern athletic economics. Does financial parity, specifically, through the implementation of a salary cap, actually improve competitive balance in college sports? Or does it artificially restrict highest-level competition?
And our discourse today is drawn from a recent, pretty rigorous analytical breakdown of the Wild West of NCAA sports economics.
Yeah, a breakdown that posits a really provocative thesis. For college football to survive its current trajectory, it essentially must adopt the professional structures it has spent a century avoiding.
It's a fascinating tension to explore. We are looking at an entire ecosystem that operated under the guise of amateurism for over 100 years. And now, almost overnight, it has been thrust into the harsh, completely unregulated light of a free market.
Precisely. And that brings us to where we stand on this core issue. My position is that a salary cap is a necessary stabilizer that prevents uncontrolled financial escalation and preserves the sport's competitive integrity.
And my opposing position is that in an open market, what appears as separation is actually competition at its highest level, and artificial caps constrain the natural value defined by the highest bidder.
So to truly understand why the proposed solution of a formalized cap is even on the table, we first have to examine how both sides define the current state of the NCAA landscape.
Let's get into it.
Let's move into our initial arguments. I'll start by outlining why a financial ceiling is not just, a preferable option, but structurally vital to the sport. The source material draws a critical, defining distinction between competition and separation. Right now, the system is completely wide open. There are no financial boundaries, no wage scales, and absolutely no consistent framework for how money moves between boosters, programs, and athletes.
Right.
And without those limits, the financial gap between programs doesn't just quietly exist. It aggressively, exponentially widens.
Well, yeah, because capital aggregates at the top. That is the fundamental mechanism of an unrestricted market.
Exactly. But we have to remember that sports are not purely traditional financial markets. They rely entirely on the reality, or at least, the believable illusion of contested outcomes. Which brings me to the core danger highlighted in our analysis: predictability.
Okay.
When the game is essentially decided in the accounting department before a single snap is played in September, the sport loses its foundational appeal. We reach a point where the 10 schools with the most financial backing aren't simply competing better within the same league.
Right. They become their own thing.
They are operating in an entirely different, untouchable tier. A salary cap forces a paradigm shift. It mandates that programs can no longer simply outspend their rivals to cover up institutional flaws or, bad coaching.
Yeah, but
If your offensive line is terrible, you can't just buy 5 new elite linemen in the offseason. A cap forces programs to lean into talent development, coaching, and system building. Ultimately, a cap tests who can build the best team rather than who has the deepest pockets.
look, that is an incredibly compelling vision of how a highly regulated utopian sports league might operate.
I don't know about utopian.
But we have to look at the reality of the material we are analyzing, and quite frankly, the reality of human behavior. The text explicitly admits that the current system feels exciting, aggressive, and like competition at its highest level.
It does say that, yes.
Why? Because it is exactly that. The current wide-open system is functioning precisely as an open market should. It is rewarding the highest bidder. When a massive program secures an elite 5-star talent through a huge financial commitment, that isn't a failure of the system.
It's certainly a failure for the teams that can't afford him.
but it's a direct, measurable reflection of that institution's desire and commitment to win. You frame predictability as the ultimate enemy of the sport, but the source material also admits a crucial, undeniable reality. Perfect parity is never realistic.
Well, no one is arguing for perfect mathematical parity.
But the mechanism you're proposing attempts to engineer exactly that. Therefore, a salary cap isn't a true creator of competitive balance. It is merely an arbitrary restriction.
An arbitrary restriction?
Yes, it is an artificial ceiling specifically designed to punish the most committed, resource-rich programs. So let me conclude my opening with the natural follow-up question that stems directly from the text.
Go for it.
If we acknowledge perfect parity is impossible, who's this financial boundary actually meant to serve? Is it meant to serve the institutions that fail to adapt, or is it meant to serve the sport itself?
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. This isn't about serving an abstract concept of failing institutions, and it certainly isn't about punishing success.
It kind of sounds like it.
It is about the fundamental survival of the entire college sports ecosystem. Let's dive into the long-term economic risks and the true impact on smaller versus larger programs. What we are seeing right now is not controlled, sustainable economic growth. It is rapid, unmitigated escalation.
Escalation is just growth you don't like.
The analysis notes that the financial numbers keep rising, player expectations keep shifting higher, and there is absolutely no real baseline to bring it all back to center.
I come at it from a different way. You are operating from the assumption that every program currently playing college football inherently deserves to compete for a national championship. And that the broader market should be artificially suppressed to protect that illusion for them.
It's not an illusion. It's the definition of a league. If you're a fan sitting in the stands at a mid-major program right now, the current system is devastating. You are essentially paying to watch a farm team develop players for the top 5 powerhouse schools to buy away next season.
Well, realistically, they've always been farm teams in a way.
But not like this. If a smaller program evaluates a diamond-in-the-rough 3-star recruit, coaches him up, and turns him into an All-American by his sophomore year, they should be rewarded with a great team.
Right.
Instead, because there is no cap, a massive powerhouse can just drop $1 million in the transfer portal and poach him. Running college football without a cap right now is like letting Formula One teams build engines with absolutely zero regulations.
Which sounds awesome, by the way.
Sure, it's thrilling to watch a car go 300 miles an hour for one lap, but when half the grid's engines explode and the other half goes entirely bankrupt trying to keep pace, you don't have a sport anymore. You just have a spectacle that is eating itself alive.
But the ability to generate those massive resources is part of the competition. You can't separate the team on the field from the institutional muscle that supports it.
You can in a regulated league.
But why would you want to? The alumni networks, the massive stadium revenues, the decades of brand building, the localized booster passion, that is all part of the game. You want to nullify all of that historical and financial success just to artificially level the playing field.
Not nullify, standardize.
Long overdue market correction. Protecting smaller programs from larger ones with deep financial backing artificially subsidizes lower-tier, mediocre programs at the direct expense of top-tier excellence.
That's a harsh way to look at it.
It's the honest way. If an elite program has the capital to assemble a historically great, unstoppable roster, why should a governing body step in and say, no, you must field a weaker team so that a school with a fraction of your resources feels like they have a chance? That deliberately diminishes the peak quality of the product on the field.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. We aren't asking elite teams to field weaker teams. We are asking them to demonstrate their excellence within a standardized, universally applied framework.
A framework that limits them.
If we treat the league like that open auction without a paddle limit, we aren't testing who the best evaluator of talent is. We aren't testing who the best tactician is. True excellence in any endeavor, especially sports, is demonstrated by how effectively you allocate finite resources.
Right, but their resources aren't finite.
Exactly. When resources are functionally infinite, the intellectual and strategic challenge of roster construction completely disappears. It just becomes a brute force financial exercise. And if we don't put a ceiling on this, The whole house collapses. The source material warns us explicitly that something has to give.
Because of the spending.
Right, because university athletic departments, even the big ones, are running massive deficits trying to keep up with this arms race.
Which means the market will eventually correct itself. The programs that can't afford to play at the absolute highest level will drop down to a tier where they can.
But at what cost? You talk about institutional muscle and alumni networks generating infinite resources, but let's connect this directly to the humans involved. Who is actually on the receiving end of those resources?
The players.
The players. And throwing endless, unregulated money at them isn't empowering them. In many cases, it's destabilizing them. Let's move into a direct cross-examination of how this Wild West actually impacts the athletes, specifically regarding the concept of protection.
I welcome that, because I think the word protection is doing a lot of heavy lifting for your side of the argument.
Okay, let's define the terms for clarity. When we talk about players getting paid right now, we are largely talking about the NIL space, right? Name, image, and likeness.
Right.
Which is largely funded by collectives. These are essentially independent booster organizations pooling money to pay players, operating entirely outside of direct university oversight.
Correct.
So I have to ask you directly, how can you defend a system that the analysis explicitly describes as inconsistent, unclear, and sometimes unstable for the very athletes navigating the space?
I defend it because economic freedom is inherently messy. It is absolutely true that the landscape is currently being built in real time. And yes, it is chaotic, but the underlying mechanism is fundamentally empowering. For the first time in history, the athletes are capturing the capital they generate.
But where is the actual structural protection in that messiness? We're talking about a 19-year-old kid trying to navigate a complex legal and tax minefield with groups that have no formal obligation to the league.
They have lawyers and agents now.
But the text points out that a cap introduces desperately needed guidelines. It helps define market value and creates a predictable environment. Right now, not every player is walking into a structured situation. A salary cap isn't just about limiting the ceiling at the top.
What else is it doing?
It's about establishing a reliable floor and a transparent, legally binding market for everybody.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. You are deliberately equating a wage ceiling with protection. It is a brilliant rhetorical trick, but it falls apart under scrutiny.
How so?
Okay, hold on. You're trying to tell me with a straight face that capping a 19-year-old quarterback's salary at, say, $1 million is protecting him? Protecting him from what? Generational wealth?
No, protecting him from...
In an open, unrestricted market, a player's value is perfectly and inherently defined by the highest bidder. If a booster collective in Texas or Ohio is willing to pay a high school senior $3 million to play for their team, his value is exactly $3 million, period.
But
so I ask you, how does intervening to artificially depress his market value protect him from anything other than making too much money?
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you are completely conflating a promised dollar amount with actual delivered stability.
Money is money.
But it's not. Let's explain the mechanism of what's actually happening out there. Protection in this context doesn't mean keeping them from getting rich. It means structural, legal stability.
Okay.
Because these NIL booster collectives aren't bound by standard league-wide employment contracts, a booster can promise a high school senior $2 million to commit.
Right.
But what happens if that booster's real estate portfolio takes a hit? Or what if the player throws 3 interceptions in his first game and the collective decides they just don't want to pay out the rest of the year? We are seeing this happen. The money simply vanishes.
That is a contract dispute which exists in any free enterprise.
But they don't have standard employment contracts. They have a patchwork of localized endorsement deals. In a Wild West scenario without a cap, collectives can promise the moon. But when the financial numbers keep escalating without a systematic baseline, those financial models often prove entirely insolvent.
So the market learns.
While the kids are left with nothing. A regulated cap, which implies a formalized league structure, means contracts can be standardized, mathematically guaranteed, and overseen by a central players association.
Sure, yes.
It transitions the player from being an unprotected pawn in an unregulated, volatile bidding war to a recognized employee with defined rights, health benefits, and grievance processes in a structured league.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered the deep, cynical, historical context of amateurism that we are just now escaping?
Of course.
For decades, the NCAA establishment structurally protected athletes by ensuring they made absolutely nothing, while the institutions, the coaches, and the broadcast networks made billions of dollars off their physical labor.
I'm not defending the old model.
But look at the optics. Now that the floodgates have finally opened and the players are getting their massive slice of the pie, the immediate panicked instinct of the establishment is to say, wait, this is too chaotic. We must impose a cap to protect you. It reads as incredibly paternalistic.
Paternalistic?
If not outright hypocritical. The players don't need protection from the free market. They need time for the market to mature. The collectives will professionalize on their own.
But the historical maturation of any sports market always leads to collective bargaining and salary caps. Look around. Every single major, successful professional sports league on this continent utilizes some form of financial structure to maintain competitive balance.
College football isn't the NFL.
But it's acting like it, whether it's through a hard cap, a luxury tax system, or revenue sharing inherently tied to salary limits. They all do it. Why? Because pure unrestricted capitalism in a sports league eventually destroys the product on the field.
That's debatable.
And as our source material states plainly, if college football is going to survive operating like a massive professional sport, it needs to start thinking and governing itself like one.
Which perfectly sets up the fundamental rapid-fire philosophical clash we need to address here.
Let's do it.
What is the actual identity of this sport moving forward? Because right now, college football feels like a bizarre, beautiful mix of everything. Part century-old tradition, part ruthless modern business, and part absolute chaos. And I would argue that the chaos is exactly what drives the immense excitement, the viral moments, the massive television viewership.
Let's get into it rapid fire. I argue that a structured system doesn't remove the excitement or the passion. It refines it. It gives the chaos actual sustainable direction.
But imposing sanitized, NFL-style professional rules on college sports destroys the unique, decentralized, regional identity that made it a cultural juggernaut in the first place. You are trying to turn a 100-year-old localized religion into a sterile corporate product.
If we don't have some kind of financial structure in place, this doesn't feel like a cohesive league anymore. It's just a loose collection of 18 to 22-year-old independent contractors wearing the same colors for a few months before moving to the highest bidder.
A league where the highest bidder usually wins is simply the honest, unspoken reality of all modern sports. We are finally stripping away the hypocrisy of the last century. We used to pretend the money didn't matter. Now it's out in the open.
Hypocrisy and structure are not the same thing. You can absolutely have an honest, transparent market that still operates within agreed-upon boundaries to preserve the integrity of the game on the field.
Integrity is entirely subjective. The fan of the Powerhouse program sees total integrity in their school, aggressively doing whatever it takes, legally and financially, to secure a championship. The chaotic, open market you want so desperately to eliminate is the exact mechanism that allows a dormant program to rapidly ascend if they find the right financial backing. It's the American dream applied to college athletics.
The American dream usually has antitrust laws and labor regulations. As we step back from the rapid fire and evaluate the totality of this analysis, my stance remains firmly anchored in the long-term sustainability of the sport. We can't just look at the next 2 years.
Right.
We have to look at the next 20. For college football to survive its own massive, unprecedented economic growth, it has to adopt the structure of a professional league. Using a salary cap as a stabilizer isn't about punishing success or keeping players from earning a living.
You say that, but
It is about forcing true coaching, genuine development, and strategic system building over the lazy, mere act of outspending opponents. It provides standard contracts that actually protect players from insolvent boosters and prevents the entire 130-team sport from fracturing into a super league of just 15 hyper-wealthy schools.
And my summary of the material is that the wide open market, terrifying as it may be to traditionalists, is finally providing an honest, transparent reflection of value. Attempting to artificially engineer parity through a salary cap fundamentally restricts the aggressive, highest-level competition that currently defines the peak of the sport.
I hear you.
A cap punishes programs that have spent decades successfully building massive resource engines and passionate fan bases. Furthermore, it artificially caps the true earning potential of the athletes, all under the highly questionable guise of structural protection. We are witnessing a market finding its true level, and we should let it run.
Yet, looking deeply at the source material, there is a very clear, undeniable point of convergence between both of our perspectives today.
Oh, absolutely.
We both acknowledge, and the economic analysis confirms in stark terms, that college football is currently operating as a literal Wild West. There is no consistent framework, no agreed-upon rules of engagement, and no structural oversight for how millions of dollars move right now.
Yeah, we are watching a massive system in the middle of a profound, messy transition.
Exactly.
On that, we are in total agreement. The status quo is entirely temporary. The overarching question isn't whether the system will change. It is changing every single day. The question is whether it will organically settle into a natural, free market hierarchy dictated by capital, or be forcefully wrestled into a rigid, structured, collectively bargained framework by administrators.
It is deeply valuable for us to look closely at the underlying financial mechanisms driving the sports we consume. It completely changes how we view the product on a Saturday afternoon. Deciding whether college football should prioritize a highly structured, refined league identity where everyone operates under the same financial constraints,
Or embrace a chaotic, high-stakes, open market where value is completely uncapped.
Exactly. It requires us to deeply consider what we actually want the sport to be at its core. Do we want our Saturdays to be a test of athletic development and strategic excellence, or simply a reflection of sheer institutional wealth?
Or perhaps, as we look at the billions of dollars involved in broadcasting rights and stadium renovations, we must simply ask if those two things, strategic excellence and institutional wealth, have finally become entirely inseparable. You can't have one without the other anymore.
As we conclude today's discourse, I want to bring us right back to that high-stakes auction house we envisioned at the start.
Right.
If the paddles have absolutely no limits, the room is certainly filled with incredible tension, the drama is palpable, and the final dollar numbers are undeniably spectacular to witness.
Unbelievable to witness.
But we are left to look at each other and ask, when the hammer finally falls, are we actually applauding the beauty of the art, or are we just applauding the depth of the vault? Thank you for engaging with us, and we leave it to you to decide whether the highest bidder should always win.